human females exert choice, and quite brutal choice, you might put it that way. They're very choosy, and it's one of the things that seems to have distinguished us from chimpanzees. And what roughly seems to happen is that the male dominance hierarchy elects men to the higher, say, rungs of the hierarchy, and then the females peel from the top. And so that means that what you can say is that human beings are the consequence of intense male dominance competition. It's not necessarily dominance, but it's competition for the upper rungs of the hierarchy, mediated by female selection. And so that's produced, as far as I can tell, a powerful pattern of behavior. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, you're twice as likely to be a failure if you're a man than you are if you're a woman, in that you have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors. And you think, well, that's impossible, but it's not. All you have to do is imagine that every woman has one child, half the men have two, and the other half have zero. And so, end of problem. And that's basically how it works out. So women are more choosy maters than men by a substantial margin. There's a funny study done by the guy who established, it's one of the big dating sites, and he looked at how women rated men, and they rated the 50th percentile man at the 15th percentile. So 85% of men were below average according to women's ratings. Now, men had their same arbitrary choices because, of course, they preferred younger women to older women, and they were more swayed, I would say, by attractiveness, but that didn't have nearly as big an effect on their actual rating of women. So anyway, so, you know, from a Darwinian perspective, nature is that which selects. That's all it is. And so sexual selection plays a massive role in human evolution. You know, the fact that we have these massive brains is very likely a consequence of a positive feedback loop in sexual selection. You know, because otherwise that's the only time you can get really rapid changes in evolutionary space, where, you know, you get a process going that reinforces itself. So there's a little preference for intelligence, and then that produces more intelligent men and women, and then there's a little more preference for intelligence, and, you know, maybe then that turns into the ability to speak and or to master fire, and then there's way more selection for intelligence, and the brain just goes like this, you know, and women have paid a pretty big price for that, because your hips are basically so wide that you can barely run, and if they were any wider then you couldn't, and of course the pelvic passageway through which the baby travels is too small, so it's really painful and dangerous, and the baby's head has to compress quite a lot. I mean, they come out cone-shaped often, and then they're born really young, so you have to take care of them forever. Like, what the hell, you know, a deer is born, a fawn is born, and it's like 2 seconds later it's standing, and then it's running from a lion. It's like, you know, it's like 15 minutes later, and a baby, it's like, he just lies there and, you know, utters plaintive noises. That's all it can do, and it does that for like 10 months before it could skitter away from a sloth if it was predatory, you know. So you really got to take care of those creatures. And so the woman encounters this mysterious and aggressive male and tames him. That's the female hero myth, as far as I can tell. And it's Beauty and the Beast. And so it's because, well, there's no fun in taming someone who's already tame. And what makes you think you really want someone who's tame anyways? There's no interest in that. Plus, when chaos manifests itself, what makes you think that someone tame is going to be good for anything? And it's a real question. And so, but it has to be civilized. And so what happens is that the archetypal female seduces and tames the aggressive male. And that's her encounter with chaos. Of course, females, they're more complicated, and that's exactly how it is. And it's no wonder, because their lives are more complicated. Human beings can, hypothetically, can look at an array of middle-aged men and pick out the CEOs without knowing them. They can do it at better than chance. That's actually why people get married, you know, just so you know. Because this is built into marital vows. I'm not leaving, ever, no matter what. It's like, okay, well, that definitely puts a boundary around our arguments, right? Because I can't say every time you manifest one of your flaws, which you're likely to do just as often as me, well, enough of this. It's like, that's horrible, man. If your whole life is, well, every time you get out of line, I'm out of here. It's like, how the hell are you? First of all, you're not going to admit to ever doing anything wrong. Second, you're going to be on your, you're like a scared cat the entire relationship because, well, who knows, it could just come to an end at any moment. It's like, you know, people say, well, if the possibility of divorce is open, it makes you free. It's like, yeah, that's what you want. You want to be free, eh? Really? Really? So you can't predict anything. That's what you're after. It's a vow. And it says, look, I know that you're trouble. Me too. So we won't leave, no matter what happens. Well, that's a hell of a vow, but that's what.